Hello, my name is Cliff Coggins, and today I am going to discuss my systematic review of the effects of nutrition education in the classroom environment on preference for and intake of fruits and vegetables. So this is a systematic review of related selected research, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you. So to start off, for children aged 4 to 18, fruit and vegetable intake has been a concern of the Centers for Disease Control and the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, since the 1990s. Research indicates that fruit and vegetable consumption reduces the risk of developing chronic diseases such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. The USDA provides schools with reimbursement for number of meals served that meet specific nutrient and meal component requirements as outlined by the Food and Nutrition Services sector. These guidelines are outlined in hopes to improve the nutrient quality of meals served as well as to reduce the incidence of childhood obesity. For breakfast, fruit requirements are 1 cup for all children in grades K through 12. For lunch, 1/2 cup of fruit for children K through 8th grade, and 1 cup of vegetables for grades 9 through 12. And pictured on the right is generic serving size with pictures and some suggested items. Pictured above is a table outlining those requirements. The NSLP and SBP are the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program. So we're looking at schools that implement nutrition education programs that follow those guidelines for fruit and vegetable requirements. So you can see that vegetables are not required for breakfast, but they can be substituted for fruits, while both are required for lunch. So children are required to select a fruit and vegetable for lunch with only the requirement of fruit at breakfast. So a little background, the United States Department of Agriculture issues dietary guidelines for Americans every 5 years, with the My Plate guidelines being issued later in 2011. Now, schools participating in the National School Lunch Program are required to follow guidelines set forth by the Food Nutrition Service Department of the USDA, with these requirements for foods served in the school environment that closely follow the dietary guidelines for Americans. So they try and keep them consistent across the board. The fruit and vegetables must be 2 separate meal components. The Centers for Disease Control reported that for children 2 to 18 years old, fruit and vegetable intake increased 67%. However, the average is still below the recommendations. So you can see between the years of 2003 to 2010, they increased intake by 67%. However, the overall intake is still well below recommendations. Efforts to increase fruit and vegetable intake in school populations include in-class nutrition education strategies that may be coupled with taste tests, reward systems, take-home resources, and repeated exposure measures to reduce new food fear in populations of 4 to 18 aged children. Programs such as Crunch and Sip, Food Dudes, Go Wild with Fruits and Vegetables, and Power Play all incorporate some level of comprehensive intervention strategies with differing levels of success throughout. All of the studies listed in this systematic review include self-reported fruit and vegetable intake and preference as the metric for improvements as a result of this nutrition education and intervention. Due to the lack of studies indicating an increase in fruit and vegetable preference and intake as a result of the National School Lunch Program for children in the school environment, it is necessary to evaluate these programs and strategies. So my PICO T. For children and adolescents aged 4 to 18, that's my population, how does nutrition education on fruit and vegetables in the classroom setting, that's my intervention, affect preference for and intake of fruits and vegetables? That would be my problem. Pictured below on the next slide, we will go into the methodology and inclusion and exclusion criteria. My methodology with databases used and search terms references are listed in the table below. So for the most part, I tried to limit my term for school to school age children, students, diet, food, nutrition, and all that good stuff. My inclusion criteria, so we're looking at children school-aged. I include 4 to 18 because some schools allow children to start school at the age of 4 if their birthday falls within the year that they will turn 5 within the school year for kindergarten, that sort of thing. So there were studies that included 4-year-olds, so I thought it was relevant to include that as well. So we're looking at the setting of a community, a school, educational, relatively healthy status. The size of the study groups, I'm aiming for at least 100 for a total for both the control and intervention. The year range, I'm looking at the last 5 years, and I'm looking at articles only in English. So my exclusion criteria was everything outside the inclusion criteria. So children younger than 5, or 4, I should say, and older than 18. If the setting is outside of the school, we're not looking at home environments, although some of these studies did have information and data that were included along with the inclusion criteria, so that was fine. Anything outside the past 5 years will not be included in the systematic review. So using the search terms listed previously in accordance with my inclusion criteria, the following table outlines my summary of articles searched. So I had quite a bit to sift through, and focusing on the study design, sample size, dropout rate, and my inclusion criteria, I was able to narrow it down to these selected articles. And this is my flow diagram following the PRISMA guidelines. So the first study that I looked at assessed a program called Crunch and Sip, which all the studies that I have listed in this review are excellent examples of nutrition education programs which play on the fact that children at any age are entertained by names, titles, colors, pictures, graphics. Anything that can pique interest other than words on a page will interest children and students to want to know more about what information is being presented to them. And it allows that information to be absorbed and understood and applied as necessary. So this study was an evaluation of the Crunch and Sip program. It sought to evaluate the effectiveness of the program at increasing fruit and vegetable intake in school environments. It provided teachers and schools with resources delivered through an in-class curriculum to promote the bringing of fresh fruits and vegetables to school as a snack. So this program has a session each week where children are taught educational material about fruits and vegetables, and they are also allowed to bring a snack. And they were encouraged and rewarded to bring a fresh fruit or vegetable or an item that fell within the guidelines of a healthy snack. The design of the program was a mixed method study, pre-test, post-test design, which examined fruit and vegetable intake, fruit and vegetables brought to schools, and teachers' confidence levels of administering the program at baseline and upon completion. So there were 818 students from 21 schools aged 4 to 11, and the children were given handouts for their parents to read and learn at home, as well as weekly classroom sessions that were taught with incentives such as pencils, erasers, and stickers that were given to the children who brought a fruit or vegetable to the session. So the outcome measures teachers' competency and how often they utilize the resources as part of the curriculum were assessed. Fruit and vegetable intake, as well as fruit and vegetables brought, was measured after the 10 weeks of sessions. The percentage of children bringing fruits was determined and examined using a paired t-test. The results indicated that children who brought fruit and vegetables increased over the 10 weeks, and the teacher's confidence level and attitudes towards the curriculum also improved significantly. Resources provided to increase educator confidence levels during the education sessions yielded greater confidence, resource utilization, and fruit and vegetable intake, as well as fruit and vegetables brought from home over the course of the 10 weeks. So it was successful. Second study I looked at assessed a program called Go Wild with Fruits and Veggies. Again, another catchy title with colorful animations and pictures. Pictured at the right are some of the characters which are used as part of the educational material. The Go Wild with Fruits and Veggies program provides resources and education for educators to perform in the classroom nutrition education sessions which involve an optional taste testing experience for children to select and try new fruits and vegetables. This study examined the effectiveness of this program at increasing fruit and vegetable intake in third graders over the course of a 7-week curriculum. The study was a randomized controlled trial of third graders, 662 total in the North Dakota Public Schools area. A pre-post test design was used to measure fruit and vegetable intake at baseline and upon completion. Surveys were given to the students to provide how many times per day, 0 through 5, fruit and vegetables were consumed, the beginning and end of the 7-week curriculum. Chi-square was used to identify any demographic differences between the control and intervention groups. One-way ANOVA was used to assess differences in dietary intake pre- and post-intervention. Results indicated that, compared with the control group, children from the intervention group increased fruit intake 1.3 to 3.9 times per day, and vegetable intake from 1.3 to 2 times per day. The study concluded that the combination of in-class education sessions, taste testing, and take-home materials were effective at increasing fruit and vegetable intake in third graders over the course of these 7 weeks. The limitations of this study are that it did not perform assessment measures after the 7-week sessions were completed to determine lasting longevity of the nutrition education sessions. The third study I looked at assessed a program called Project Refresh on fruit and vegetable intake and preference. So the goal of this study was to assess the effectiveness of this nutrition intervention program at increasing fruit and vegetable preference and intake for 3rd through 5th graders from 34 elementary schools in Maryland. Participants were randomly assigned to one of 3 interventions. There were 3 groups. One which would receive a cafeteria renovation including marketing materials and staging techniques to enhance fruit and vegetable offerings and likeness. One group would receive the in-class nutrition education, and then the last group would experience both the nutrition education as well as the marketing materials and cafeteria renovation. Pre- and post-test measurements were taken to assess changes within and between groups over the course of one school year, the 2011-2012 school year. So this was a longer study over the course of an entire school year. Outcome measures. Fruit and vegetable preference and intake data was self-reported via questionnaires given to the students before and after the intervention. Changes from baseline measurements for intake and preference were analyzed between the 3 groups and within each group at baseline and upon completion. The results indicated that self-reported intake and perception of peers' intake increased significantly for the comprehensive intervention group compared to either the cafeteria renovation or nutrition education groups alone. Limitations to this study are that the data was self-reported for intake and preference. Similar programs which utilize cafeteria staff and teachers to promote fruit and vegetable intake in the cafeteria may have similar results.